Just even major events. What happened in chapter 12? What happens just before Passion Week? What's like the first Saturday of Passion Week? What happens? Yeah, perfect. All right, Lazarus Saturday. What else happened? This, anything. Guess what happens after Lazarus Saturday? What happens next in Passion Week? Palm Sunday, right? Yeah. Okay. So Lazarus Palm Sunday. And then something happens at the end which you probably would have forgotten, so I will just say it anyway. It's where Christ predicts his death. It's where he starts to say, like, he's pretty much like, lock in. I'm about to go towards the cross. And this is what's going to happen. And it's like you hear a voice of the Father from heaven, and like it's for the sake of the people. So recognize when Christ says this, it's not just his like will, if you could put it like that. It's not just his earthly will. It's the Father's will that he goes to the cross. Um, so this chapter is going to be a bit of a heavy one. I'm going to warn you from now because a lot of the big events from Passion Week happen here. Pretty much everything but the crucifixion happens here. So it's a very interesting chapter. Can we start reading with just that first verse actually? Whoever is reading.
Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come, that he should depart from this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end.
Okay, very good. Why is St. John emphasizing a particular point? It's probably quite obvious what he's doing there. What is that one word that he's coming to twice actually in that verse? And like it almost seems like why is it add the extra sentence at the end? It's almost like it's repeating the point. It's what? The word begins with L. Did I hear love? Love, loved, yeah. Okay, perfect, right? And John, in his epistles and in his gospel, the one thing he comes back to time and time and time again is love, right? So even here, as Christ is about to go towards his crucifixion, right? Like we have the feast of the Passover, he's again focusing on what? Love, right? That this is the one thing that is the most important, and not love in the simple, oh, I love, like, I don't know, I love my girlfriend, or I love this person, or I love my mom, I love my dad, I love whoever, right? It's not that kind of love, right? It's a love that is deeper, right? A love, like, do you know how we speak about the three different types of loves? What are they? Like in Greek, there's eros, which is like lust, which is the bad one. There's philo, which is like brotherly love. And then there is agape, which is like love unto death, like a very strong love. Yeah. And this is the kind of love Christ has, the agape love, like love to the end, love to his death. Yeah. Where he's willing to sacrifice himself to the utmost. And it's pretty much it is for this aim that he came, right? Now I'm going to go into a little bit of like, I don't know. This might be a lot of like history, a lot of like logistics, if I could put it like that. But I think it'll be very interesting to know. So, has anyone ever heard of the problem of the Passover? Like in terms of the date in the Synoptic Gospels versus John's Gospel. Have you ever heard of this issue before? No. So, in terms of the way John writes the Gospel, he times the Passover very differently to the Synoptic Gospels. So in the Synoptic Gospels, or so it seems, it seems that the Passover lambs are being slain in the temple before Christ actually has a Passover meal. Right? But in John's Gospel, by the wording, what seems to be happening is he's pointing to the fact that the Passover lambs are being slain at the same time Christ is on the cross. Right? There's this timing dilemma, and the reason this dilemma comes up is for one very simple fact: it's because of the use of the word Passover, right? Because for a Jew, Passover actually not just refers to the Passover meal, which is very weird, right? Because for us, like you think Passover, there's only one Passover, so it happens on the 14th of Nisan, where it's commemorating when the Israelites passed, like the angel of death passed over them, and they fled from Egypt, right? But no. Or at least from my research is what I saw. There's like a lot of different views on this, and there's like it hasn't been resolved fully, if you could put it like that. So some people will say it's a different calendar. Like, do you guys know in like the Eastern tradition, for example, there's like the old and new calendar. Has anyone ever heard of that? Yeah, right. So where they'll celebrate feasts on different days depending on which calendar they're using, right? There's almost seem to have a similar issue. And even like Father Taljus Malati comments on it, and a few of the church fathers say the same thing, where it seems that there was one day where the people like celebrate the Passover in their homes, like in terms of the local tradition, but in terms of the temple tradition, it was what was set by the priest, and that was off by a day or something. But I'll give another explanation that might help. So in the Synoptic Gospels, just to re-emphasize, the disciples prepared the Passover meal on the first day of unleavened bread, or Thursday night. Yes, so same day. Yeah, on the first day of unleavened bread or Thursday night. Judas went out to betray him that evening, and Jesus was arrested in the night. He was then crucified on Friday. Yes, that's the timeline we're used to, right? In John's Gospel, John says this after Last Supper had occurred. So this phrasing, when the Jews went to Pilate's headquarters, they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so that they will not be defiled but could eat the Passover. Right, so it seems like when Christ is being arrested and being taken, what's about to happen hasn't actually happened yet, supposedly, is the Passover. Right? Which is weird, because then what is Christ celebrating with his disciples when he's being arrested? And that's his timing dilemma issue. So for a bit of a Jewish history lesson, like very quickly, I won't dwell too much on this. But for the Jews, okay, in the Old Testament, Exodus, I think chapter 12, you have what occurs, the Passover, right? And you have it's very easy to miss because there's a bunch of information that gets thrown at you in one go, Kedar. But there's a bunch of dates that happen, right? The first one is the 14th of Nisan, which is actually the day on which the Passover lamb was slain and eaten, right? It was on that night. But also it marked the beginning of something called the Week of Unleavened Bread, right? Which is another feast in the Jewish calendar that happened immediately after, yeah? And during this feast or during this week, they would eat nothing but unleavened bread. Literally, where's the name? That's where the name comes from, right? And that went from the 14th of Nisan, on the evening on the 14th of Nisan, to on the evening on the 21st of Nisan. So literally a full week from evening to evening. Yeah. Now to make this even more complicated, there was something. So whenever a Sabbath day, so a Saturday, landed in between or during a feast or in between two feasts, it was called a high Sabbath, right? So that high Sabbath, which was the Saturday, was also referred to as the Passover, right? Also, the week itself was referred to as the Passover, and the feast of Passover was referred to as the Passover, right? So for a Jew, if they heard these Passovers, they get it as similar things. Yeah, we get it. There's talking about a feast, but when you come back and try and read it, and you see Passover, you think instantly of what? The Passover lamb, the Passover feast, right? So pretty much to say, there's actually no contradiction between the Synoptic or John's Gospel, but the way it's written actually seems to be on purpose, where John is trying to almost get you to line up the slaying of the Passover lamb with Christ's slaying on the cross, right? So there's actually no contradiction there. That's just for context if anyone ever asks you. It's a very weird question. I don't know why someone would ask, but just in case. Yeah, perfect. Sorry, spent a lot of time on verse 1. It will be a bit quicker after this. Who wants to read a big chunk? Verse 2 to 17. Yeah.
And supper being ended, the devil having already put it in the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, arose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. After that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. Then he came to Simon Peter, and Peter said to him, Lord, are you washing my feet? Jesus answered and said to him, What I'm doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no part with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, He who is bathed needs only to wash his feet, but is completely clean. But you are clean, but not all of you. For he knew who would betray him. Therefore he said, You are not all clean.
Okay, stop there for a sec. What's happened? Just very simply, what's happened? Yeah, the details, a bit more detail. So he's washing their feet, but what are the details?
Beautiful.
Perfect. Okay, that's right at the end. What happens at the start? So how does Saint John like set it up? And what being ended? Okay, perfect. Supper being ended, right? What's another detail in that in verse 2? Right. Yeah. So Satan already put in Judas's heart that he's going to betray Christ, right? And then what happens straight after that? What does Christ do? He rose from supper. That's verse 4. Rose from supper and laid aside his garments, took a towel and girded himself. Right? So a few details to keep in mind. Supper being ended. So that actually would not have been the Passover supper if we think of it in terms of synoptic gospels. That would have been, so the way the feast occurred, there was like different stages to it. Right? So this would have been like, if I can put it like this, the preliminary supper. Yeah, it's the best way to put it. Actually, in Jewish tradition, the Passover, there was sort of 3 cups of wine that were drunk at certain points. And associated with those drinking of the wine, there was, I think, if my details are correct, first supper, and then I think the Passover feast, and then the last one where they sang a hymn and then drank wine as well. It could be, the details might be a little bit off, but there's sort of a sequence to it. So this is Christ getting up, like this is sort of the preparation supper, like the mini supper, if I could put it like that, and he gets up, right? And Judas is still there. He's emphasizing those details. Judas is still there. The guy's about to betray him, and Christ knows this. He still washes his feet. And then you have that very interesting interaction with Peter, right? Where Peter is like, "How are you doing this? Like, why?" Right? And you've probably heard the answers before. Why is this so jarring? Like, why is this, like, to Peter, seeing this is like, "Whoa, what's he doing?" Who normally did this? Yeah, the servant, right? Why? There's actually a very practical reason why. Why did the servant do this? Yeah. hmm Yeah, awesome. Why did you need to wash someone's feet? Like today, like it's not like it's casually catered. Oh, like bro, come, I'm gonna wash your feet before you come to my house. Like, yeah, right. So because they wore sandals, they're walking in the dust. Their feet got dirty. It's like very uncomfortable. Like, have you ever been on the beach and they put ship on and you still walk around in the sand? It's the worst feeling in the world, right? But imagine doing that and having to walk for miles to get anywhere, and you're wearing sandals, right? So like your feet are stuffed. Like by the time you get anywhere, like it's a mess, right? So as like a courtesy, whenever a Jewish person will enter a house, the servant will come and wash the feet of the guests, right? To make them comfortable. It's like a welcoming sign. But you would never see anyone but the servant do it. Like the person who owned the house, it was so far beneath them to do this, right? And Christ does what? Completely breaks custom, like completely. And he is the one who's the rabbi, who's the teacher of all these guys. And he's the one who gets down, takes off his outer garment to wash their feet, right? He's the one who does it, not the servant. Why? And to put this in context, right? Like in John's gospel, there's 3 Passovers, right? There's 3 Passovers that are mentioned. It's not mentioned in the first or the second Passover. He doesn't do this, right? He doesn't do it. So why does he do it at this 3rd Passover? And what does it mean? Someone give me a guess. Someone say something. So firstly, why on this 3rd Passover? It might seem complicated, but it's not. I don't think it's too complicated. What makes this Passover special compared to the other 2? Maybe more people there? Think more in terms of what's going to happen in this Passover. Right, yeah. So he's the last Passover with them. Yeah, it's the last Passover with them. Also, he's about to do something straight after this Passover, which is like, firstly, crazy. Like, as in, like, anyone seeing is like, whoa, our teacher is about to die at the hands of the Jews that he's trying to save. Yeah, like, there's meaning. Like, there's a point that happens in like, it's not directly related. But St. Paul's life and his epistles, right? There are a few moments where he gets up and has like a long speech, he says, right? The few times he does it actually happens 3 times before he goes to his death, right? It happens 3 times on his way to Rome, where he gives an oration to someone to explain to them his faith, to explain to them who he is and where he came from, right? As Christ is doing the same thing, right? It is here in these final moments he shows who he is, right? And who is he? Right? Who is he? A servant of God, but also a servant of who? Right. Yeah. That the greatest of you is servant of all. Right? The greatest of you is servant of all. Um, like he doesn't take hold of his status. Right? He's the son of God. He is God. Right? But he doesn't take hold of the fact that he's God. He doesn't put it on them like, I'm God, you should listen to me do this. No. Right? He does completely the opposite. He does what we least expect, where he literally empties himself. Right? He empties himself of himself. If I could put it like that. Because it's not the place of God to serve human beings, but yet it is. Right? It's one of the godly virtues to be humble. Like Mario was saying before. Yeah. Humility is something that's not human. It's something godly, and only God can provide that. And He is the one who shows how to be the most humble, right? Because it takes a person who's the greatest to actually drop the furthest, if you get what I mean. Like, it's not humble for a servant to wash someone's feet. It's humble for a king to wash someone's feet, right? It takes someone who is great to be the most humble. And because God is the greatest, when He does something like this, He's dropping the furthest, right? He's being the most humble of anyone. Yeah. Can we actually get, I don't know how annoying this is going to be, but Philippians chapter 2, verse 6. Oh, sorry, go back to the beginning of the chapter. Sorry, next verse 3, I think. Yeah, okay, from verse 5, can someone read? And I'll just tell you when to stop. Verse 5 here.
Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. Therefore God also has highly exalted him and given him the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, those in heaven and those on earth and of those under the earth.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Right? Has anyone ever, like, I assume we have read this, but has anyone ever pointed out to, like, this particular set of verses, right, is something that is quoted, I think, the most out of all of St. Paul's epistles? Or not quoted, referenced in, like, the church father writings. Whenever they do a commentary, they stop at this section a lot, right? And they call it the Christological hymn, right? This hymn is talking about pretty much the incarnation and the nature of Christ, right? Not just the nature of Christ, of who Christ was when he was on earth, right? Where being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, right? But made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant, right? That word bondservant, I forget the original Greek word, but literally means slave. I think it's doulos, yeah, doulos. Literally, he's calling himself a slave. Or St. Paul's referencing Christ and calling him a slave, right? It's to show the extent we are meant to go to as well. Like if we are to imitate Christ, that is what we are called to do. If in our service we think for even a second I'm great, for even 1 second, you've missed the point completely, right? A lot of the time we say, oh, look how good I am, I'm serving in the church. I say this to myself first. I'm serving in the church, I'm a deacon, I'm doing whatever, I'm so good, right? The second I do that, I've completely stuffed up. Like I'm the furthest from Christ, because Christ did completely the opposite. Where being God, he lowered himself, right? He emptied himself. And that's what we are called to do. If we are to imitate Christ, and this is for St. Paul, the essence of service. If I'm to imitate even St. Paul, this is what I need to try to do. Where I empty myself. I don't think for a second I'm great. I don't think for myself that, khalas, I've achieved what I need to achieve, I'm good. Remember last week when we were talking about, it escaped me. But we're talking about when we go through this cycle of like, oh, I follow God, I am so good, I'm doing things on my own, I'm so great. But in the end, it is not me, right? In the end, it is not me. It is the grace that I am able to do anything, right? It is a grace that I am born how I am. It is a grace that I breathe. It is a grace that I live, right? So if I do anything good, it's not of me, it's of Christ. Yeah, He is the source of all goodness. Yeah, He is the first man, right? Like sometimes called the second Adam. No, he is the Adam. Yeah, he is the one we are meant to imitate and the one in whose image we are formed, right? Yeah, that was a long rant. I'm sorry. I think we can go back to John chapter 13. Yeah, and just read. I want to get up, sorry. The thing freeze. Oh, there we go. We're at verse 13, right? 12? Yeah, can you read from 12 to 17, please? Or if you want to pass to someone else, it's okay.
So when he had washed their feet, taken his garments, and sat down again, he said to them, Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Most assuredly I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is he who is sent greater than he who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them.
Perfect. Right? So that point again, the servant is not greater than their master. So Christ knows for a fact, he's saying he is their master. He's saying, I am your Lord. Right? But if I am your Lord and your master and I do this, then more so you should be doing this also. Right? Like if I'm the one who's greater than you, and he's not saying this in a puffed up way. He's saying, if I'm the one who's greater than you and doing this, you also should do this. In the same trend as last week, it's not a poem this time. It's taken from the Kontakion for Great Thursday from the Eastern Rite, right? And it's referencing this particular, like it's talking about the washing of the disciples' feet, and the words are beautiful. So I want to read it out. It's a little bit long. I'll try and summarize if I can, but just listen to the words. For some context, it starts with talking. Actually, I won't rule it. I'll just read it, and if you don't understand, we'll do it again. The sea washes the brick, the abyss washes the clay, and it does not destroy its composition, but keeps its substance intact and wipes clean its character. Notice the immensity of the Maker, and yet see what sort of disposition he has for his creatures. They have reclined and he has stood. They are fed and he serves. They are washed and he wipes them clean. And the feet molded of clay are not cast by his hands into the fire. Have mercy, have mercy, have mercy on us, you who bear with awe and receive awe. May sleep take me to death if I allow you the immortal to bend down before me and mortal. The enemy would laugh at me if he deal in his way with me. Is it not enough that I am considered as yours? Is it not more than enough that I am considered by you and called the first of your friends? But are you to wash my feet, vessels of clay, you the potter of the universe? And my perishable legs and feet, you, a redeemer, desire to wash them. Have mercy, have mercy, have mercy on us, you who bear with awe and receive awe. Does it make sense? What's it saying? Sorry, I can't cast it, but what's it saying? So this is the hymn in the Eastern Rite that they're singing or they're praising with during the time, like when they're referencing the washing of the feet. What is the theme there? Did I read it too fast? Was there I can reread it if we want to. But what did we catch on that first reading? God serves, but also serve him. Yes. Yes. But there's one very, very strong image I want. Actually, I'll try and give you the one image that to me at least stood out. And it's the image of God's might and yet his gentleness, right? Like it starts off with referencing the immensity of the waves and I forget the exact words. Like the sea washes the brick, the abyss washes the clay. So these great things, these things that are mighty, right? The things that will destroy you. Like if you let a ship go into the abyss, it'll be destroyed in an instant, right? This is the same thing that washes the clay. And it doesn't destroy it for some reason. It washes the clay, but doesn't destroy it for some reason. And then it sort of like not juxtaposes, like it then aligns it to like, okay, look at Christ, yeah? He's the maker of the universe. These are the hands that created the universe, right? And yet they're gentle enough to what? Wash the feet of the disciples, right? Yeah. Like how amazing is it that the one who created the whole universe, and that's how it's sort of, it's positioned, is like He's the one who stands. He's the one who washes. He's the one who's gentle to his disciples, right? When in fact, like, you imagine a maker, imagine a creator, like imagine the gods of like the Greek pantheon, like these gods that are destructive, yeah? And then you have this God who's gentle, right? Where he's so great, so amazing, and yet so gentle. Honestly, I might need to send this one in the group as well, but remind me because I forgot about the one last week. But honestly, I have no other words other than that, so I think we can move on. Verses 18 to 30.
I do not speak concerning all of you, I know whom I have chosen, but that the scripture may have been fulfilled. He who eats bread with me has lifted up his heel against me.
Wait, one sec, sorry. So, because it does a little bit of a jump, and even when I was reading the split up, it confused me a little bit. I do not speak concerning all of you. So if you go back to the verse just before it for 1 second, if you know these things, blessed are you if you do them. So referencing like the washing of the disciples' feet and being humble. And then he jumps to what? I do not speak concerning all of you, right? Who's the one he's referring to here? Judas, right? So this next part, just for context, is going to be about Judas. You can continue, sorry.
Now I tell you before it comes, that when it does come to pass, you may believe that I am he. Most assuredly I say to you, he who receives whomever I send receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. When Jesus had said these things, he had troubled in spirit and testified and said, Most assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me. Then the disciples looked at one another, perplexed about whom he spoke. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom on one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. Simon Peter therefore mentioned to him to ask him it was of whom he spoke. Then leaning back on Jesus' breast, he said to him, Lord, who is it? Jesus answered, It is he whom I shall give a piece of bread when I have dipped it, and having dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. Now after the piece of bread, Satan entered him. Then Jesus said to him, What you do, do quickly. But no one at the table knew for what reason he said this to him. For some thought because Judas had the money box, that Jesus had said to him, Buy those things we need of the feast, or that he should give something to the poor. Having received the piece of bread, he then went out immediately, and it was night.
Okay, perfect. So what's happened? Just very basic rundown. What's happened in that chunk? Yeah, Jesus revealed he's going to betray him. How did he do it? Yep, and give it to him, right? So like he dips the piece of bread into the cup and gives it to the one who's going to betray him, who's obviously Judas, as we all know, right? Verse 21. How does Jesus feel about this whole situation? Verse 21, sorry. Oh, Andrew, sorry. How does Jesus feel about this whole situation? What are the words used to describe it? Troubled in spirit, right? Troubled in spirit. So obviously he's not happy about the situation, right? He's not happy that one of the men he had chosen to follow him was going to betray him. Yeah. Sometimes with Judas, we think like, because the way the prophecies are set up, we sometimes think, oh yeah, there was a prophecy because this is the way Christ had to make his way to the cross, so someone had to betray him, right? No. So sometimes we get this confused with prophecies. Like we confuse the order of things, right? The reason we have a prophecy is because God is able to see what will happen. It's not him telling us this has to happen. Do you get the difference? Like it's because he sees what's going to happen. It's not because this is what has to happen, right? Because there's still the autonomy of human free will, right? Humans are still able to do the things they want. Yeah. So when we have the prophecies of Judas, is that the one who betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver? It's not because someone had to do it. It's because Judas wanted to, right? And that's the sad thing. That's why Jesus is troubled, right? Because when he picked him, he knew, right? When he picked him, he knew he would be the one that would betray him, right? It's not like God set him up and picked him so he can betray him. No. He picked him because he would have been good for it, right? If he was willing to follow God, he would have been good for it. He would have been good for the service, right? And that's sometimes maybe the thing we miss. Like we think Judas was evil through and through. I don't think so. I think he was a normal human. He's a normal human who wanted the Messiah to come. And when the Messiah came, he was willing to follow him, right? He followed him through everything, yeah? Like, you know, there's people, like a lot earlier in John, I think chapter 5 or 6 or something, somewhere in that range, like where he tells them, you have to eat my body and drink my blood, right? He tells that to a lot of the disciples, and a bunch of them leave, right? Like, actually, a bunch of the people following him say, this is too hard to understand, and left him, right? He is one of the people who didn't leave him, yeah? So he wasn't, like, it's not like he was a bad guy, but he made a mistake. He made a big mistake. Yeah. Hmm. I think the best way to understand it is this: like, in the same way the devil puts thoughts into each one of our hearts, right? Like, there's two types of temptations. Yeah, there's the temptations I like think myself into, like I cause the temptation on my own like free will, and there's temptations that are put there by the devil, right? Like Saint Anthony's story, you see both. Like, there's a moment where the devil will put, like, he'll create this image of gold in the desert to try and tempt him to pick up riches, or he would actually appear as a woman to try and tempt Saint Anthony to lust, right? That's from the devil. It's not like Saint Anthony chose for that to happen. But there's also temptations where St. Anthony was hungry, or St. Anthony was struggling with a thought, or like things like that, right? Like, there's sort of those two wars. I think the best way to understand it, yeah, like, is that, like, is the devil put the thought into his heart, right? Where there's probably already, and we'll go into why I think this is the case. Like, there's already the sense in which Judas was not happy with Christ, in the sense that Christ didn't do what he expected of him. So the second that thought was put into his mind, he was almost too ready to accept it, right? And it's not like he had no free will in the matter. It's not like the devil forced him to do it and he had no choice. Because if that was the case, I would actually feel very sorry for Judas, because that was not his fault, right? Like, if it was demonic possession, yeah, getting you to that state would have been wrong. But when he did the act, it wouldn't have been his fault. Yeah. I think it's more along the lines of that. It was a temptation of the devil. The devil put the specific thing in his mind, and he was more than ready to accept and go with it, right? Does that sort of make sense? Yeah. Actually, it'll be a good question for Abono. Abono, Mark has a question. Thank you, Abono. Thank you, Abono. To actually add to that, this it's not exactly confirmed, but I have read it from like a few Bible commenters. I think specifically Brent Petrie. I always stuff up his name. It talks about how Judas actually seems to be a zealot. So a zealot Jew was a Jew who their focus was on like a messianic king coming to rescue the Israelites, right? Their focus was heavily on the Messiah will come and he'll be the new king. He'll be the new David who will come and destroy the Romans, right? So some people actually say Judas was almost, it's going to sound like, it sounds bad, but it was trying to goad Christ into doing something, right? Some people will say that. It's not, of course, confirmed, but He did this. He's like thinking, okay, I'm going to do this to try and make Christ finally act, because he's not doing the thing I expect, right? He's not bringing in the armies to come and destroy the Romans. He's coming in and he's like being too humble, right? Is what Judas might have been thinking. So Judas, when he went to betray Christ, might have very well been thinking, you know what? If I do this, it'll force his hand to do something. But when he realizes this is not what Christ intended from the beginning, this was never his intention, he loses hope. Right? He loses all hope, actually, to the point where like he commits suicide. Right? He loses complete hope in, I think, the fact that his plan didn't work, and also he realized he betrayed his own friend and it wasn't worth it in the end. It did nothing. Right? So that's another take you can get on it. Of course, which one is exactly right, we don't know, because we weren't there. But there are indications that he was a zealot and had that mindset that a lot of the other zealots did have. So yeah. I want to read, actually, there's a hymn that we don't always do, but it's said on Covenant Thursday, right? It's To Dipno. We've pretty much borrowed it from the Greeks, but it's a very beautiful hymn. And these are the words of the hymn. Of your mystical supper, O Son of God, accept me today as a communicant. For I will not speak of your mystery to your enemies, neither will I give you a kiss like Judas. But with the thief I'll confess you, remember me, O Lord, in your kingdom. Right? Why do we say this hymn in this particular moment? That is very, fairly obvious, right? Because what did Judas do in the Last Supper that we don't want to do? Right? Give the kiss of Judas, as in to say what? Betray Christ. So as Bon was saying before, right? We listen to some of the things the devil tells us, but in the end, it's our choice if we do or not, right? But he was susceptible to the idea that the devil planted, and he followed through with it. And each one has the idea we're susceptible to, right? Each one has the sin or the thing that I love that I'm susceptible to, right? As we were speaking about last week. Aboni all, but St. Mark's always says the favorite sin. What is your favorite sin? And for each one of us, as we come to the Eucharist, and especially on Covenant Thursday, right, where it's like we've spent this whole week, yes, we're in church 24/7, but we don't have communion, which is very unusual, right? If we're in church, normally we're having the Eucharist. And it's a warning to us, right? It's what is the thing that I'm susceptible to, that the devil's enticing me with, and I'm saying yes time and time again, right? What is the thing? To each one is different. To each one we have our certain desires, certain passion we're fighting against. And as a reminder to us that even if we think we're close to Christ, even if we're like Judas trying to follow Christ as best we can, sometimes we come in with our own, let's say, motives, right? Like we might be coming to church for the wrong reason. We might not be coming to have that relationship with Christ, right? Because look at the juxtaposition between John and Judas, right? John is leaning on Christ. He's next to him. He's the one that he loves, right? As John even puts it himself. And then you have Judas who's looking for the excuse to betray him, right? So you have to be careful. We have to actually measure what's our intention. Like why are we here? And I say this to myself first, right? Like why am I here talking about the Bible? Am I living the Bible? It's a question I need to ask myself. Is it something I'm taking on board and actually doing? A question I need to ask myself, right? Because our motive and the reason we are here is more important actually than being here, if I can put it like that. Forgive me, one of us wrong. But our motive is super important, right? Like a person can be far from church and become a saint in an instant. Why? Like Saint Moses the Strong. Why did he become a saint? Like, why did he change so quickly? Because his motive was pure, right? Is where he was looking for God his whole life. And the second he found him, he didn't let go. Even if he knew he was wrong and did whatever before. And even when he found that he was sinning, right? He found that he lived a sinful life, he turned because he found God. He found the one he was looking for. And we have to always ask ourselves, who am I looking for? Am I looking for my own pride? Am I looking for my own lust, my own desire? Or am I actually looking for God when I come to church? Sorry, I took a very depressing turn, sorry. Okay. Can we please read verses 31 to 35?
So when he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself, and glorify him immediately. Little children, I shall be with you a little while longer. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, where I am going you cannot come. So now I say to you, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another.
as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another.
Perfect. A new commandment. What is the new commandment that Christ gives? Perfect. Add to it, because that's not the new commandment, right? So the commandment was always, even in the Old Testament, there was a commandment of love in the sense that you don't do wrong to your neighbor. You try like to get peaceably along with everyone, correct? But what's the new part of it? What's the new part of the commandment? Not just to love one another, but as who? As I have loved you, right? Christ's new commandment is not simply to love one another. It's to love as he loves, right? Which, what does that mean? And actually, in the context of where he's saying this, what does it mean, right? Because what's he about to do? Yeah, right? He is about to die for the sake of all. Yeah, that's the love of Christ, and that's the new commandment. And it's not a simple commandment. It is the hardest commandment possible, right? Because the standard is no longer human. The standard is divine, right? So what that means for us is that this is not something I can attain by myself, right? I am not the one who's able to attain this level of love. Yeah? I can only attain this level of love from who? Christ, right? It's a grace if I'm able to love as he does. Yeah? It's a thing that's divine to love as he does. Yeah? Which is why when you see the saints, like the question we always have, and I always have this, whenever you see a martyr, for example, you're like, how on earth were they able to do that? Right? Like there's actually today's commemoration, you know, the Governor Arianus, he was there during the time of Diocletian, and he was actually one of the people who caused a lot of the Christians to be killed, because a lot of them will come to his governor, and he would get them killed. He'll get them martyred, like he'll get them beheaded, whatever, right? And then there was a moment where he was changed, yeah, and he was changed the experiment almost takes it for granted. He struggled. I'm like, what struggle did he have? Like the guy literally was killing Christians, and then like he takes one of the someone comes up to him and tells him, look, your eye that just got pierced by an arrow, take the blood of that martyr you just killed and put it on your eye and it'll heal you. And his eye's healed, right? And he's in shock. He's like, how did this happen? And in that instant, he believes on Christ, yeah. And then the second they find out that he believes and he's a Christian, they take him to Diocletian. And Diocletian's, what happened to you? How did this happen? Right? And he's like, I'm not going to change my faith. I'm a Christian. And he's killed. Right? That's not human. Yeah? There was this guy who was just killing Christians not that long ago. Now goes to Diocletian and actually defends the Christian faith, saying, I have seen things among these Christians as they were dying that I could not believe. And it had to be godly. It had to be divine. These things I couldn't explain. And he was martyred. Like, that's not human. Yeah? So the ability to love as Christ loves, the ability to actually love as the martyrs love, is not human. It is a grace that is given by God. And the only way to obtain that grace is in God, is in Christ, is trying to live with him. Like, you can live your whole life praying, but you might be doing it wrong. You might be doing it for the wrong reason, right? Like, actually, let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Because if anything, those first few verses summarize all of this in like one go. Sorry, I made you jump a lot today, Andrew. I'm so sorry. Start from verse 1. Actually, it's just verses 1 to 3. It's not long.
Though I speak with the tongues of men and of the angels, but have not love, I have become sounding brass or a clanging cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mystery and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, but have not love, it profits me nothing.
Perfect. Right? If you do not have love, right? And connect this to the commandment Christ just gave. Love one another as I have loved you. If you do not have this love, all these other things are pointless. Yeah, all of these other things are pointless. And you might ask me how. How do I obtain that love? To be honest, I can't give you the answer. Right? Because it's not for me to give it. It's not for me to tell you how to get it. It's you do what you can. Make yourself receptive to God. Make yourself receptive to his will, to his grace, and he will give it to you. Right? And it's not a satisfying answer, I know, because it's not a simple thing. I can't choose when God will grace me. I can't choose when God will make it possible for me to love as he loves. But he will. Right? If you're sincere in following him, you will. Like Mother Teresa. I don't know how to say her name properly. I'm sorry. I speak like a freshie when I say her name. But she actually like writes that for a long time in her life, she didn't feel the presence of God. Right? And this was someone who's serving like heavy. Yeah? Like beyond any of us ever could. And she didn't feel God. Right? So who am I to say to God, why don't I feel you? Like I haven't even done a little bit of what Mother Teresa did. Yeah? So I know it's not a satisfying answer, but it's the answer. And there is something in the struggle you learn and you gain that you wouldn't have gained otherwise. And God knows when the right time is for you. Yeah? It's just trusting that I know is hard. I know trusting that is very hard. But that's the whole struggle of your life, to learn to trust in God. And even when you don't get the response you want, or you don't get the thing you want. Yep. And sorry, I'm very over time. So finish up very quickly. So just last couple of verses. Chapter 13, John 13, verses 36 to 38. And I'll just end off with that.
Simon Peter said to him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I will lay down my life for your sake. Jesus answered him, Will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly, I say to you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times.
Thank you. So Peter's intentions here are very good, right? Peter's intentions here are very good. He doesn't want to let go of Christ. He wants to follow his master wherever he's going. And he doesn't yet get it that he's about to be crucified, right? But Jesus warns him. He's like, Peter, I know your intention is good, but you will deny me, right? And it's interesting. I think is the best way I can put it, right? Like Christ knows what Peter's about to do and warns him. He's like, Peter, look, you're about to deny me. I'm warning you right now, you are about to deny me. Your intention is so good and you will follow me after, as a reference to his martyrdom, right? He says, you will follow me after, but right now you will deny me. And it's amazing that God sees how we struggle. He sees how we struggle. He knows our struggle, right? He knows what we'll become, but he also knows our struggle and warns us about our struggle. He wants us to understand that even if I stuff up, right, that he's still there at the end. Yeah, because at the end of John's gospel, Christ comes back to Peter specifically and says, Peter, do you love me 3 times? Right? And meets Peter where he's at, because he says, Peter, do you love me? He says, you know I love you, Lord. Right? Peter, do you love me? You know I love you, Lord. Right? And each time Christ actually, like in the Greek, it's very interesting, because he's like, Peter, do you love me? And the word he uses the first time is achepi. Like, do you love me unto death? And then Peter's like, you know I love you, Lord. The second time, Peter, do you love me unto death? So it says achepi again. He's like, you know I love you, Lord. And it's like Peter's like, he can't say it because he knows he doesn't love him to death, because he knows he fled when Christ was going to die. And then Christ, the last time, says, Peter, do you love me? And uses philo. Like, do you love me like a brother? And Peter is upset with himself. Like, I can't remember the exact word, but it's like he groans or something. And he's like, I love you, Lord. And Jesus is willing to accept him there. He's like, you don't love me unto death yet? I know you don't. It's okay. You love me as a brother? That is okay. I will accept it. But he meets him where he's at. And Christ meets all of us where we're at. We sometimes think we have to be perfect to meet Christ. We have to be perfect so I can come to him. It's like I have to be at this stage or I'm not worthy of coming to church. I have to be at this stage or I can't serve. I have to be at this stage or I can't do this and that. Right? But God meets us where we're at. Yeah, he meets Peter where he's at. He even warns Peter, look, bro, you're about to stuff up. Like, you're about to deny me. I'll accept it. But you are about to deny me. Just be ready for it. And he warns each one of us. Like, we know when we're being tempted. We know when we're being led into temptation. Right? But it shouldn't end there. It shouldn't end with the fact, I've been tempted, I sinned, halas is done. No. Get up. Yeah? I think it's St. Augustine who says, the devil gives us boldness in committing sin and then shame in repenting. The order should be flipped, right? We should have shame in sinning, but boldness in repenting, right? And that's what Jesus gives to Peter. He warns him so that he can be bold when he realizes he's sinned. He can be bold and get up when he realizes he's sinned. And each one of us, God does the same thing. We just have to be willing to get up. And that is the hard part. Any questions or comments? I know I went a bit over time, so sorry. Yeah. There's no stupid questions. Yeah. Mm. I think so, yes. It wouldn't have happened in the way we expect, so it wouldn't have happened maybe through betrayal of Judas. But God's or Christ's intention was always that he would go to his death, right? He would always die for the sake of the world. And he would always die the most brutal death possible. And if that is the case, it's the death of the cross. How that would have happened, I don't know. But Judas gave an avenue for it to happen. And I don't think Jesus would have wanted it to happen like that. He wouldn't have wanted Judas to betray him, but Judas did. Yeah. How it would have happened otherwise, I don't know. But I wonder if you have a thought. Yeah. Yeah, maybe the Pharisees just got an opportunity, got hold of him, threw him into prison. Who knows? Like it could have happened any way. But yeah, as Abuna was saying, like even buts and hows, we don't know. The important thing was that ultimately Christ came for to save us, and ultimately he died to save us, and ultimately he resurrected to save us. So that is almost a given if you could put it like that. But how and what and method and vehicle, I don't know. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, thank you.